Hey everybody, my name is Matt Pierce. I'm the Learning and Video Ambassador for TechSmith Corporation. So glad that you're here with us today watching or listening to our episode. We've got a great show today. We're going to be talking about the business of learning. So, it's one thing to think about like, oh, we're making videos, we're making images, but all those things that we're doing have a purpose, and our guest today is going to help us to learn a little bit more about the business of learning, why that is so important to understand, especially if you're not a business person in terms of finance and all other things. So let me go ahead and jump in and introduce our guest today. Ajay is a fellow of the Certified Professional Accountants and a Certified Training and Development Professional, or some of us know that as CTDP. Ajay, with his partner Teresa Kirkwood, published 3 books with her recently titled The Trainer's Balance Scorecard, a complete resource for linking, learning, and growth to organizational strategy. Under his leadership, Training Magazine awarded Central Knowledge their Technology in Action Learning Management Project of the Year for success with Apple. He's an award-winning writer, twice winning the prestigious trainingindustry.com Readership and Editors Award. eLearning Magazine recognized Ajay as their 2016 Learning Champion and Thought Leader. The World Training Development Congress named Ajay their 2017 Distinguished Trainer. He's also a leading expert contributor to eLearningindustry.com. And Ajay developed courses for LinkedIn Learning and regularly guests on broadcast media and talk radio show discussing workforce performance issue. And with that, and so many other more things that he's done, we want to welcome Ajay to our podcast today. Ajay, welcome. Thank you for being here with me today.
Oh, Matt, it's always a pleasure to be with you. And it's great to be with you here because usually we're at a conference chatting over a coffee or something. So happy to be here with you.
Absolutely. Well, I almost threw in a bunch of heavy metal references, but I thought maybe I would miss, the audience wouldn't totally understand, your love and appreciation. But, obviously there's a lot of great things that we've been able to say about you already that you've done. But tell us a little bit more about yourself so our audience can get to know you a little bit.
Professionally, I'm just a curious individual. I love business. I love finance. As you said in my intro, I'm a certified professional accountant in Canada, and it's just the business side has always been a natural attraction for me. So but also learning. The learning part was also something that I would say I'm a self-described learner. I love to learn, and my wife, who is a big admirer of YouTube, you Matt, she says I have this wealth of useless knowledge in my head, and I just love learning. So I tried to parlay those two things in one area. And about 20 plus years ago, I decided to look at the business side of how we put knowledge in people's head and how it impacts the performance of organizations. And essentially that's my specialty is workforce performance and how to connect that to, business outcomes. And so hopefully I can share some small insights to that today with you.
Yeah, so let's step back kind of high level, because I'm guessing there's a lot of people who they hear some of these terms and they're all like, they just kind of freak out like, I don't know anything about what you're saying. But help us understand, why is understanding business, kind of some of those concepts of business and what even that means, so fundamental for anyone that's in our organization, but especially for learning professionals?
Well, so let's start with the fundamental thing. The first thing that I want to share with people is that learning and knowledge within an organization is probably in the top 5 preoccupations of your business leaders. So if you think you're not relevant in the organization, I want to share some news with you. You are very relevant in the organization and some of the biggest worry among your business leaders. Number one. So let's go back to your question, Matt. Based on that fact, they want to know from any function that supports the business, they want to know how what you're going to do is going to contribute to improving the performance of the organization. Now, naturally, what we take away, when I say we, the global we, the general we take away in learning that means we have to show some financial success. And that's not the case. And so you are the subject experts in learning, but you need to prove to the business leaders that your function is contributing to the business output in some fashion. And that applies to any support function. So I always like to say, and you've heard me say this before, Matt, L&D is a business within a business to improve business results. And so we can't forget that our root, doesn't matter what technologies we use, what fancy videos we put on screen, what type of courses we develop, all of those things need to function and show value for the organization, moving it forward into the objectives and direction it needs to go.
No, I love this because I think the reality is I've heard what you said before. People say, well, they don't value what we do, or we don't, they're not seeing the efforts that we're putting forth as a training department as something that is worthwhile. So I love that you've brought it back to that kind of notion, right? Like you're a business within a business, but you have to understand. And how much of this do you think is maybe a training issue that, like, as learning development professionals, or, if I'm a technical writer, I don't understand the business part of it because, I didn't get a business degree. Or is it a language issue? Is it like almost a vocabulary challenge?
It's probably a little bit, half a dozen one, and what's that saying? Something like that. Anyways,
half a dozen one or the other, something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. So it's probably a little bit of both. So first, I want people to understand. People, when I come across, and sometimes I come across quite brash, but it's more of the tough love in me that I want to show L&D. I want to make sure L&D succeeds. And so with that, I come across in that sort of tough love aspect. What comes across to people is that I expect them to be business/financial experts, and that's in no means what I want them to be. Number one, you are a subject expert in L&D, so respect that. That's why you were hired. However, you need to have some literacy. So go back to your question, Matt. One is literacy is you need to understand the business function. You don't need to be an expert in it. You just need to know how the parts work together and fit together, because there are other experts in the organization to help you do that. There's the IT people, there's the finance people, and so forth, that you should partner with to get their subject expertise to help you build a better case. The second side of the equation is that's the literacy, but the second side is the language. We tend to use terms sometimes that are either misleading or inappropriate with business leaders. And when I say inappropriate, I don't mean that they're bad. It's just, it doesn't mean what you think it means to them. And so some of the examples in recent years that we've heard are things like return on investment, or ROI, or return on expectations, ROE. These type of things are great within, well, I wouldn't even say they're great, but within our context of our conversation within L&D, they mean one thing. But then when you share it with a formally educated business professional, like a CEO or CEO or anybody in a business function, they're ingrained with certain terminologies, and they mean certain things that we will never change, and we need to respect that. So it's all about, let me step back for a second, Matt. If you go to another country, right? I think we were just talking about your son who was in Mexico, right? I'm sure he picked up some language skills to go to Mexico to be able to converse with the people there and try to use the right terms to make sure they understand him appropriately. Now, he may not be fluent, but he was able to get by probably. And it's the same thing for us. We need to, when we're going out of our boundaries in our L&D field, we need to go into that new country, which is the business side, and communicate in a way they understand, not what we want to try to make them understand. I don't know if you see the subtle difference, and that's really the big deal here.
That makes perfect sense. And so I'm wondering, okay, that makes total sense to me. Like, you got to learn the language. They're using, make sure you're using the same words in the same way. I just recently had a conversation with some individuals in another organization. It was refreshing that we used the same terminology around some business terms. And it was great because it made sure that we were able to, communicate clearly. So with that, though, I'm wondering, like you mentioned, there's other people in the organization there that can help you with that. So if I'm in this position and it feels like I'm already being an expert in my craft or my field of learning and development or technical writing or whatever it is I'm doing, how do I go about getting that without trying to become an expert? Is there a good way to go about gaining that knowledge?
So, we in L&D, just like any other support function, are required to build certain initiatives, right? And whether that be initiatives where the primary initiative is to build some sort of knowledge, delivery system, let's call it that, where we get knowledge into people's head that they can apply it. Okay, so now there's several ways we can do this, right? There's a myriad of ways we can do this. We can do it, a standard instructor-led training session, to e-learning concepts, to blended, whatever it is that you want to come up with, you can come up with it. The point with any way you're going to come up with it is that you need to know that, first of all, it's a project or / initiative, that around it requires resources. And those resources that come into it need the expertise of those other people. So, and I know, Matt, we talk, I love, and I don't say this because I'm here with you, we love the TechSmith products. They're just fantastic. But there's no reason for me to say, because I love it, that I have to go out and buy it. is it going to serve a purpose? And am I buying the right product, that technology that's going to do what I need it to do? Maybe I don't know that. I need the expertise of the IT people to come in. So rather than sit in my cubicle and guess the type of technology I need, not just for what I need to develop, but if it fits in with the infrastructure of the environment, I'm going to bring in some of those IT experts into my conversation and say, hey, I need your advice here and guidance. Here's what I need to do and here's what I need to build, but how does that fit in within our ecosystem of our technology? And then the money, right? There's the money side of things. We always forget that companies have scarce monetary resources. I don't care who you are. If you're Apple with billions and billions of dollars in the bank, to their scale, that's still a limited resource for them. So they have to make choices that are going to add significant value to your organization and allocate that money. So then when you're building this, you have to build a case that proves the fact that you're going to drive value, and then for the money you're asking for. So bring in the finance people to talk to you about that. And so it's about total communication and working within, being that cog in the wheel that's actually working with the other cogs in the wheels is what I'm trying to say. And I don't know if I'm going too deep or not deep enough. Please let me know, Matt. I mean, I don't want to go too far into the weeds here. That's the thing.
Yeah, no. I think this is really great. And as you're saying these things, the things that I'm thinking about is like, okay, so I feel like, one, you can't be on an island. You've got to start talking to these other players and not just assuming that not assuming they're against you, but that they're going to want to work with you. But it also seems like going and taking some time to spend with those other groups and ask them the questions and be okay. It's almost like you need to be okay saying that I don't know this, that I'm not an expert in this area. Please explain it to me. Because I feel like sometimes, and I feel like that's hard to do for a lot of people, to say like, I don't know what you mean when you say,
but should it be our role to do that? I mean, we're the ones promoting learning, right? I mean, learning implies that we don't know. I mean, that's the term learning means you're learning something you don't know. So why are we being so? I mean, I'm being generalistic, Matt. I don't want to bundle everybody in the same bucket here, but in general, why are we so afraid to ask these questions when we're supposed to be learning? We're supposed to practice what we preach. We're supposed to learn from the thing, and it's not just to the functions either. By the way, it's not just going to the IT or finance or the admin or whatever to help you build this initiative. It's all, to your point, Matt. It's also going to the department. Like, stop sitting in your cubicle or your office assuming that you know what the problem is and to solve. Maybe first, let's work with the obvious. Maybe it's not a training problem. It's a reflex from a manager that says, hey, they don't know this, so we're going to go to training and get them trained on it. Well, push back. You're the subject expert. Maybe you do your needs assessment and you realize, no, it's not a training problem. It's an operational issue. And push back. Don't be afraid to do that. That's where your value lies. Or if it is a training problem, don't assume that because Matt doesn't know this topic, that we got to train Matt in this topic and he can become better. Maybe it's a lot deeper than that. That's what your needs assessment. Become their therapist. Sit down and learn about their business. I mean, no, seriously, you laugh, Matt, but I say that now more and more. It's like you have to become that department's therapist. And what I want people to, and this is where I get a little passionate, so my apologies in advance to the audience. But, when you buy a product, okay, I'm going to work with an analogy. I love analogies and I love acronyms. So you buy a product. It doesn't work out the way you thought it would work out. So you go back to the store and you get your money back, right? So because you feel that, it didn't work out the way you want, so it doesn't have any value to you. Well, guess what? Those people wanting that training from you, that ask for those initiatives that you helped develop to solve whatever problem they had, if they're not satisfied, guess what? They're the ones who are paying for it. Your budget is coming from their budget. They're paying for this, and they don't do this, but they have every right to go back up to you and say, it didn't work. Fix it, because your solution did not work because you didn't talk to us. You didn't dig deep enough. So this is where that tough love comes out. I want them to be successful, but don't be afraid to get out of the cubicle. Listen, man, I use this quick example. A CEO called me once from a major company here in Montreal. I'm in Ottawa, but in Montreal, and he said to me, "You gotta talk to the training and development department. They just don't get what's going on here." So walked in. I said, "Let's go on a field trip." I set up meetings with different departments that they had to work with, between support, like the finance and IT and all this, and also the departments that they were helping certain initiatives. I said, we're going to sit there, we're going to shut our mouths, and we're just going to ask them questions. And we're just going to be that therapist, right? Think about sitting on the couch and listening to the patient. That's what you're going to listen to the patient. And That's what we have to do more of, and that's our expertise. We need to learn, and then once we learn and get to the root cause, we can build more substantial value for the organization. And guess what? Your star is going to rise so fast if you just do those small things.
No, that makes so much sense. As we were preparing for this conversation, one thing that you said that really stood out to me that I thought was really interesting, and I'd love to hear more of your thoughts is, and I wrote it down, so I'm going to look at it here real quick. It said, leaders don't want to say no, but they want justification for why they can say yes. And I thought that was such an interesting notion, because I think it's so easy to get caught up in this kind of viewpoint of the rest of the org. And this is for any role, I think, like, well, they don't want us to have it, or they don't think we need it. And I thought it was interesting that your perspective was, it's not anything about how they feel about it. It's not that they're against it. It's that they have someone that's dealing with the money, the finances, is saying, I need a good reason to say yes. You have to convince me that this is actually going to be financially responsible, not just you're doing it on a whim, which I'm sure I have probably made that mistake before.
Look, I'm not saying business leaders are not, are perfect. But at the end of the day, they're running the show, and they have some key objectives to adhere to. And whether it be a major public organization or a small organization, it doesn't matter. These business leaders in those positions have some objectives and pressure points and performance expectations. So they need to solve this problem. So going back, that they don't want to say no is a key thing here. They really don't want to say no, but they're going to say no to things that they believe is not going to add any value, because they have limited resources, people, time, and money. Those are the key resources that we talk about in finance world. And so there's a give and take between these resources. And if you can't show how that's going to, help them use those resources and make them better, that's an issue. Now, I always tell people that when business leaders come across negative, you can't just accept for what they say. I know this is a strange thing I'm about to say here, but no doesn't really mean no. I know that comes across terrible in the we movement or whatever, but no, in this case, no doesn't really mean no. It means give me more, tell me why, show me how. No is like is the first step to say you need to read between the lines. Like, well, why are they saying no? And get into and they never really say no. They'll say questions like this. They'll say, I don't see where you're going with this, or I'm not sure where I see the value, or why should we spend the money in this area? All those kind of negative questions that we take as really negative, as them pushing back and saying we don't want training, is not really them saying no to training. It's more like, yes, we do, but please prove it to me. Please talk to me in a language I understand. Please show me that you're going to solve my pain issues, right? And that's really what they're trying to say. That's where the yes is buried in there. And, unfortunately, I don't know how to look at this. I always say fortunately, unfortunately, but I get to work with a lot of leading progressive thinking, I should say, organizations. And maybe that makes me a little soft, because I walk in there and I say, a lot of times I said, you don't need me. You're doing things right. No, we need to do more of the right. And I say, well, it's the ones that are not doing the right things that need me. That's where I should be, right? But right. They don't recognize it. So I get the chance to work with a like-minded set of people that realize that. You mentioned Apple. I had a great time working with Apple, because their thought is to invest a significant amount of money in learning. However, let's be clear here. They just don't drop a bunch of money in the training department and say, build stuff and deploy it. They're like, and again, I hate to use this analogy in the context of our world today, but they're, rather than a shotgun approach, they use a very sniper approach. Mm-hmm. They're very targeted and precise on their learning. And you see that, and they're not perfect, but you see that with AppleCare. I've never really seen anybody really complain about dealing with AppleCare. I've seen people complain about Dell support, Microsoft support, but when it came to Apple, there are complaints. Nobody's perfect. But even when I have an Apple MacBook, 10 years old. I called them a few months ago. They helped me for 2-3 hours on the phone to fix it. I had to remind the guy on the other phone. I said, it's 10 years old. He goes, yeah, no worries, we'll fix it. But that speaks to the culture, that speaks to the knowledge. And when he didn't know something, he was gone out to learn it. That means they have their learning infrastructure behind the scenes to do it. So what I'm trying to say here, you can see that learning is not that shining object on a hill that has to be recognized. It is something that is embedded in the culture within the environment that is invisible. It's something that they take for granted, but it's always there. And so that's the value learning has to provide within the business.
Yeah, this is, this is awesome because what it's making me think about is, so as TechSmith, we talk a lot about using images, videos, and things like that. And I was thinking like, well, where does that tie into this? And I know, I know you do videos, and we, before we end today, I want to talk about your experience with LinkedIn Learning. But the interesting thing is I do get people coming to me occasionally and asking the question, hey Matt, how do we implement video art? Like, we gotta, no one really wants, they're saying we don't really need it. And I'm thinking the things that you just said are a great answer. Like, you have to show why video is going to be valuable. And I think it's all there. Like, all the pieces are there to help someone show why video can help solve certain problems. It's not going to solve every problem.
No.
But it's going to solve certain, you can definitely use it in a lot of situations to solve certain situations. And same with images, right? Like, and I don't mean to monologue here because you're my guest, but I'm thinking about, we have a study about the value of visuals, and the researchers that we work with set it up so you can see actually productivity improvements if people were to start using visuals in their everyday communications, like their emails, right? And it worked out to be something like, kind of what seems ridiculous, is like 6 or 7 minutes a day. But when you look at that across an organization of 500 people at 6 or 7 minutes a day, or you look at across the GDP of a nation, and they did this analysis, it becomes billions of dollars and billions of hours saved, which is incredible. I think the one stat with 500, a company of 500 employees, it was something like the equivalent of 7 full-time employees' time in a year. So yeah, I'm just, what you've said has been fantastic about, like, get to that. What's the proof? What is it going to do? How's it going to solve the problem? How's it going to actually help us make money, save money, or, do whatever it is that we need the organization to do. So this has been,
Matt, you just said it, right? I mean, you just did something that a leader, a business, and when I say business leaders, and we always think about CEOs and CFOs, but I'm talking about operational directors and stuff. Like, you say that kind of explanation the way you just said it, right? And make it more like, I wouldn't go, and the GDP is a great example, but I don't know if I'd go there with them. But, you speak to within the department, right? You say, okay, you have a department of, say a production staff of 100 people. And let's say we did sort of something visual, and that's your subject expertise as an L&D person. Say, okay, I can deploy something because it's something of a visual aspect, and here's the amount of time that's going to save. That's that time part that translate into money or efficiencies or savings, right? It's not always about profitability. Profitability is the end result, but there's a lot of elements, and I'm speaking as an accountant here, but there's a lot of elements to arrive at profitability that you need to look at. So things like your example say, if we save even 30 seconds of time from each of these aspects, it's fine. There's one example, this is going back a number of years, by the way. Speaking of visual, this is before I knew TechSmith, so this is going back maybe 10, 15 years. There was a utility company I was working with. They kept calling me in and said, look, we have people going up the telephone pole, right, and fixing something up there. They're not the full subject expert. They have to come back down the pole. They have to go to the truck, look up a book, call somebody, whatever. And it takes like weeks. And they're having brownouts or blackouts in certain areas. And the fixes were taking long. They said, we believe our learning and development team can do something, but we need you to work with them. So what we did is, like, this is back in the day when, the technology we take for granted today wasn't really, it was starting, but it wasn't really there. And I said, look, why don't we, iPads started coming out or tablets started coming out. And so I said, look, why don't we start creating this resource library online? Just a very simple thing. You have all the documentation. So rather than come down a cherry picker to go back to the truck, they have it with them. And maybe we can connect them to some intranet satellite system where they can connect directly with subject experts in a help desk. Well, talk about a visual, live tutorials of how to fix something, a transformer, whatever it was. The live tutorials that they're able to see, the dissection of parts that they could blow out into this video, and they can see exactly how to fix it, or the visual of how to call in somebody to talk to them to be able to fix it on the spot. I swear they were getting, not only did they save like something like 30% or 40% of time savings on the repair service of the poles or transformers, they actually reduced costs and people going out on these calls to fix things. And they also saw a big uptick in satisfaction from customers in the neighborhood, getting a lot of compliments back that things were getting better. So, all this stuff speaks to the reputation and the profitability of the company, but just that little thing, and we talked about visuals, that little thing just changed the world. I'm not saying I helped them solve their problem, but it was just thinking in a way that helped improve business value for the organization. So to me, it's that simple, and it's also that challenging. You that's where you need to partner up with people and start talking to people, and stop assuming that you know the answers. That's a really important thing here.
So I have a question, because I love that example. I think it's a good example. In fact, Steven on Facebook says, great point, Ajay. Video has the power to make processes very efficient and create repeatable results.
Well, listen, we're human beings. We were human beings, right? Sorry to interrupt, Matt. We're human beings.
Yeah.
Our eyeballs do a lot for us, right? We grew up ancestrally, as our evolution is, we depend on these things. So anyways.
Yeah, absolutely. But one thing interesting in that story is that the impact on customers, right? And I'm guessing it's more of a feeling of goodwill, which it's a hard thing for anyone to measure, really, to say like, well, how valuable is that? So what was you, as purely from a business person's perspective, like, how do I help someone in my leadership or organization understand the non-tangible aspects? Because it's one thing to say, like, I can tie this to revenue. That's usually pretty clear. I can tie this to productivity. We see this increase. But something like that, where it's, I'm thinking maybe outside of learning and development, perhaps, but maybe it's company employee morale, that they feel more satisfied with their job, or they feel less whatever angst that they feel doing their job. So what are the thoughts around that?
So I don't know if you allow me a shameless plug.
Yeah, go ahead. You get one.
I get one. So this, right? You talked about this, right? The last book, The Trainer's Balanced Scorecard. This book, and I'm very proud of it because it speaks to the performance management framework within organizations. And to your point, Matt, a lot of these metrics, the key performance metrics, the KPIs we talked about that business leaders look at, more and more business leaders are not looking at there was a time when they would look just at the financials, 30, 40, 50 years back, or focus more on the financials. But today, competition is so fierce. And it's not just about the financials. They look at what they call leading indicators. And a lot of these leading indicators, a lot of these key performance leading indicators are what we call non-tangible, very soft. Things like the goodwill, customer satisfaction, all this kind of stuff is very hard to measure. But they can make some sort of causal correlation to the output based on how well they're leading in these metrics. And now you see this a lot in organization. You see these, let's work with some goodwill. Like, I'm a big fan of Starbucks. Okay. I don't have any shares in Starbucks. Actually, I do have shares in Starbucks. Sorry. Okay. Full disclosure. I love Starbucks to death. And I know some people don't, but hey, but you got to admit, to me, I'm blown away. Here's the leading indicators. We talk about the softer performance metrics. People take Starbucks for granted. I never do. No matter where I go in the world and I walk into a Starbucks, am I frozen? There we go. I walk into a Starbucks, right? Each time I'm just a plain, cream in my coffee kind of guy, and that's it. But when I see somebody, and I know they can go anywhere in the world and order whatever's on the menu and then customize it even further, and it comes out pretty much consistent anywhere in the world, just like McDonald's does with their burgers, you have to be impressed of what learning support system go on behind it. Because while McDonald's is a very mechanistic kind of process, took the supply chain kind of thing into food, Starbucks did the same thing, but you got to think about the skill set we have to put into a barista's head, that person behind there, to be able to make those coffees. Because while it is somewhat mechanical, there is somewhat of an art to it as well. And so for Starbucks to be able to transfer that from a learning perspective into the head of that barista, to be able to deliver you the coffee and make me happy every single time, whether I'm in Dallas, whether I'm in Montreal, whether I'm in Paris, that coffee is the same every single time, blows my mind, because that leading metric drives Starbucks success. That knowledge, that satisfaction, all those soft goodwill stuff that you're talking about, while there is no direct tangible correlation back, they know the more they do this, the better they become and the more money they make. So you will never find, and I hate when L&D people say to me, give me that, give me the magic beans and I'll grow it, and give me, whatever. Give me that solution, that magic pill, or plug in the matrix. No, it doesn't work that way. You just have to move in the right direction, right things that help people become better. And when that engagement happens, like in Starbucks example, or in Toyota's quality. Toyota is famous for their quality metrics, right? We all know Toyota. I mean, I'm not a fan of Toyota cars. I'm not. I think they're great cars, by the way. So I don't want to slight anybody here, but I think they're boring as heck. I mean, I'm a car guy, so I like exciting cars. But I won't fault them for this. First thing when you think about quality in cars, the first name that comes to mind is Toyota. Nobody else. Right? Everybody's a distant second. But that speaks that they have what they call a lean learning methodology that, Matt, you probably heard me speak about. I never invented it, but it's lean manufacturing, but they don't talk about the learning that takes place embedded in that lean process. And that's what keeps them that Kaizen, that continuous improvement process, that learning. So all those intangible performance metrics that we talk about are leading metrics, and people know, the leaders know that if we do right by those metrics, the results will fulfill themselves, the financial results. And I know I didn't answer you concretely here, and I don't think I'll be able to, but
it's really great. It's because I think the thing that you said, and I just to sum this up, is that it matters, right? Those intangible matters. We have to be able to start to understand what they are. It sounds like, and help our business leaders understand why those are valuable, whether it's employee morale or if they don't understand that already. But so I definitely see that as
so. Can I add to that though? But because so Matt, how would you feel if when you were in school and the teacher gave you the answers before a test? What would you say?
I'd be like, yes, this is great. Yes.
But you didn't exactly know what the questions were going to be.
There's a challenge, now, right?
But it doesn't matter. You still know the answers, right? So it's a bit of a reverse here. We in the performance framework, every organization, a good organization has a performance framework. And it's not run by us. It's run by the business leaders. In that performance framework, it's brought, and I don't want to go too far in the weeds here, but it's brought down into a very granular level to each department, to each function. And in these performance matrix, what we call cascading, and you can read it in my book, but pick up things by Kaplan and Norton about the balanced scorecard and stuff like that. You can read all about it, and I write about it in all my articles. But each of these key performance indicators are tied into the overall objective of the organization, which is the mission. Now, you trace this. These are the pain points. These are the answers to the test. The metrics are there. If you go to an operational director, let's say, I'm going to use a very simple example. You go to, let's go to a manufacturing, right? And they have, one of the things is, a defect metric, right? To reduce defects or manufacturing defects. And right now they're hovering around 10%. And that's the goal, to maintain at 10%. Now, let's say you walk into the operational manager and say, hey, can I sit down with you? You have a 10% performance indicator here for to reduce, not maximize past 10% as defects. Okay, what if we can help you as learning development to help your people be better than 10%? So maybe 9% or 8%. What does that mean to you? Will you allow us to work with you and your team to find out how they can become better in reducing those defects? And what does that mean to you? Well, if the defects get reduced by 1%, it translates to X number of dollars in the production, the efficiencies. Okay, if the defects, we don't get any defects coming back, it reduces our time to redo and all this kind of stuff. And there's another dollar figure attached to that. It just flows in cascades, and then eventually, if we reduce the defects, we have less people complaining about it. So customer service is not bombarded with calls from our clients. Mm-hmm. It goes on and on. So, but if I just do that one thing, it dominoes into other performance metrics. And now I solve the pain point. And I look like a hero because I moved the needle by 0.5% or 1%. And if I do better than that, I mean, it's to me, the answers are lying in front of us. And I'm not a genius by no means, and I don't kick in and agree with me, Matt, please. I'm not smarter than but I'm not smarter than anybody else. I swear to God, I'm not. And the answers are in front of you. And if you just go out and do the right things, my goodness, you'd be a hero. I mean, literally, you'd be put on a pedestal if you just did that. I mean, so anyways, I'm on a rant.
This is all great stuff. We're going to I want to take a quick break because I want to share something with our audience, something new that we're talking about here at TechSmith. And when we come back, Ajay, and it would just be a brief minute, I'd like to talk more about your LinkedIn learning experience because I think that sounds fascinating, especially from the video perspective. So give me a second. Let me just throw this up on screen and just let everybody know. We've got something new we're launching shortly. I don't want to give a date. Hopefully soon. You're going to see a new series of conversations right here in the Visual Lounge. You don't have to go subscribe to another podcast. We are doing, these are pre-recorded, so there's nothing live to catch, but we're going to do a whole series of videos and audio podcasts that talks about creating videos. And here's the unique spin on it. You still got me. I'm sorry about that. But I'm the kind of the intermediate guy, right? I know a lot about video. I make a lot of learning videos. You've got Andy Owen, who is a video production specialist. He's run his own business around video. He edits video for his profession. Like, he knows video. And then we got Justin Simon. Justin knows all about SEO, all about content marketing and writing, but he doesn't know much about video. He knows a little bit because he works at TechSmith. And as our conversations, they're all 30 minutes or less, and we're really excited to get these launched and just drop them into your feed so you guys can catch up and learn more about creating videos. We're going to be talking about planning. We'll be talking about audio. We'll be talking about all sorts of things, kind of at some different perspectives to help you guys all level up. So look forward to that coming soon. So we're very excited about it. So, all right.
I'm a big fan, Matt, of yours. I swear to God.
Well,
I'm not saying that because I'm near, but you know, Teresa is my business partner. She loves what you do, and you guys do just awesome work. So keep it up.
Well, thank you. We're really trying. We want to raise that boat, the tides for everyone, lift their boats, help them to be successful. Because, coming back to the business side of things, we know there's lots of tools. We know there's lots of options, and you should be employing lots of them. But we feel like we're hopefully doing some good stuff to help people to make better learning content, better marketing content, better whatever content you need to make content with our Snagit and Camtasia tools. So, with that said, let's talk about LinkedIn Learning. I mean, if you have never seen LinkedIn Learning, Ajay, how would you describe it generally for people? What is LinkedIn Learning?
Well, the general term that we use in the business is MOOC, right? MOOC, Massive Open Online Courses. And so basically, it's formerly the lynda.com thing. People may recognize it. But LinkedIn Learning, LinkedIn bought it. And it is basically a huge warehouse and library of a vast amount of knowledge from really leading and interesting people. And so I get the privilege of being one of those people. I sort of pinch myself every so often to believe that I'm in that group. But there's a lot of great resources for people to learn there. And I have a great library of courses around the L&D side, so around the getting internal buy-in for e-learning. We talked about developing practical success metrics for your learning and development. That's a short one, actually. It's got a lot of good feedback. It's a good 40 minutes. So if you have a subscription to LinkedIn Learning or can get a subscription, that's a good short one to get into. And I got a few others in there, and our most popular, actually, the killer, the one that I started with, was a train-to-trainer course, which people, for whatever reason, are just, it's gone gangbusters for the last 3 years. And so very proud of it. But now they've moved me into the accounting side. So I'm doing a lot of accounting course development. A few of my courses are coming out soon, one on cost estimating, one on accounting ethics, and one on accounting interviews, how to handle accounting interviews. But I'm a bit of a unicorn or an anomaly. I think I mentioned that to you. I have a learning and development background, and I have an accounting background. So they say, wow, we can't find that. It's like, I don't know if it makes me special or weird. I don't know, something like that.
Maybe a little both, right?
so it's got me into a very unique position with them. But I think it's a great resource. It's not perfect. I'm never going to promote anything to perfect, but it's a great resource to have.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know one thing just to note for people, if they don't have LinkedIn Learning, check your local library. I know ours actually had subscriptions that you could use to get access to the content. But the thing I'm curious about is, I think from a video creations perspective, and they obviously have a business they're running. They're thinking about all those things we just talked about in terms of value and propositions and why do we solve this problem versus that problem. But I'd love to hear a little bit about your experience of what it's like to create a course, because obviously they're doing high quality work. They're doing something that, you could look at and say, like, that's, some of the best kind of content out there from a just production value. And obviously they got lots of tools, resources. They put in a lot of time into it, but like, are you like writing scripts? I guess I'm curious what that process looks like for you to create these videos.
It's pretty straightforward, and like you said, I get surrounded by high quality professionals that I would never have access to. I mean, before I get into the professionals, so basically, the course gets signed, and I have to pitch the course, and then I have the acquiring editor who pitches it to their team and feels that there's a market need for it. And of course, they know what their needs are in the market because they go out to their clients and they say, look, what can you use, and so forth. So, and if they have a certain, barn of, cattle of people with experts like myself, they'll say, like the accounting ethics one, they came to me and says, hey, Ajay, can you do an accounting ethics course? I said, yeah, I teach that stuff. So yeah, that's not a problem. So we need an accounting ethics course. So that gets signed off. It gets handed off to a producer, and the producer and I work together to author the scripts. Now, I author the scripts, but then I get this wonderful producer, talk about an expert, who helps me, really tighten up these scripts and make them very professional. And although I think I'm a good writer, and I do, as you know, Matt, I write a lot of articles, and when it comes to script writing, there's somewhat of an art to this, and that conversational aspect. And they do a wonderful job working with you on that. And then you get used to it. And talk about learning. I've learned to write differently in the last 3 years I've been working with LinkedIn. So it's really kind of cool. Then once that's done and formalized and signed off, it gets handed off. They put a team together. They put a sound person. They put a teleprompter people up. They put and a director. And the director is cool because they got a lot of, because they're in California, they get a lot of people who worked on Hollywood TV shows, right, or stuff, or worked in some form. So you're working. People say, well, I worked on this game show or this reality show or whatever, and like, whoa, dude, I'm working with you. I mean, they're not the A list, like they're not the Spielbergs here. But still, you're getting really high quality individuals that are fun. And then, of course, once it's banked, then it's shipped off to their editing team, and they put it all together. So the visuals are perfect. The quality of additional text and graphics put in to complement are there. And that's basically it. I mean, it sounds simple, but it takes a village to build a course, basically. So,
well, I'm curious
but
about
the visuals are fantastic, though. The visuals are fantastic, and it speaks to people going like with Camtasia or anything like this to build a course. You really need to, you've got great tools. So use that great tools to make great videos, and that'll be more compelling.
Yeah, I'm really curious. You mentioned that you've learned to write differently, which I think is fascinating, because I think script writing, we've seen, as we've talked about it here on the podcast before, in other places, in our TechSmith Academy, it's very popular because I think people struggle with script writing. So I'm curious, is there one thing that you can identify that you've actively changed about your process? Because I know you do other videos. I know you do videos on your own. You're doing stuff not just for them, but you're making your own content. So what is it that's changed about the way you write scripts?
So, in school, you're always taught by your English teacher to, this is the way you write, that formal writing. You don't use contractions. You don't use, slang. You use, full terms, all this kind of stuff, right? And you don't end with a proposition and all this, when to use the semicolon in a period. Well, basically, I love good writing, but that gets thrown out the window with them. Like literally, it just got, literally, those rule sets just get put aside, and they say, write the way you're talking to me. Like right now, if I'm talking to you like this, hopefully there's some transcription service that can just take the text and put it into a script format, and that's the script, basically. So you write that way, where you bring in contractions, you speak as if you're talking in a conversation. And to me, that's been so refreshing, because I'm trying to push my articles in that direction. In my recent e-learning industry articles in the last year, I've been very focused on more conversational approach, as if I'm talking to you as a friend. And I think that's so refreshing that we don't have to follow the rules. And I'm not saying it's bad grammar or bad writing, but let's be honest, Matt, there's actually times you're going to hear me say in this courses things like gonna, instead of going to, gonna, Gonna. And they encourage that. I'm like, or, to that type of inflection, and I think that's really cool, and I think that really brings a closeness. Like even if we're at a distance and I'm on a screen and you're watching me, it brings an informality between you and me, even though we're not together, that you can relate. And so I think that's really neat. That's the one change I think that really improved my writing over time.
Well, I love this, because here's the thing. I kid you not, I was in grad school and I was taking a course about technical writing. I was getting my master's degree in instructional systems technology. And the professor gave me feedback that said, you write like you talk. And I was doing all the things I was doing wrong. And it's actually, I think it's one thing that's really worked out well for me, because we have the same philosophy around our videos, right? Like it should be natural language versus formal language. And I want to be clear for anyone listening that there's time to have formal language. There are times when you want to project that formality. But I love that's the thing, that because I could see that, like you're probably going to be everything's going to be in its right place, and it's going to be, you don't want it to sound crass. You don't want it to sound like, you want it to be very professional, which is not bad. But when it comes across on camera, very formal can feel stiff. It can feel unfriendly. It can, and so I love that that's your takeaway from that writing.
And the director encourages that, right? Even when we're live recording, The director even says, okay, no, let's stop there. Let's, it tells the producer, let's recraft that paragraph because it's not flowing properly. Let's make it a little more conversational. And he'll say to me, or she'll say to me, like, we're in a living room together. Just talk. I'm the camera, but you're talking to me like we're your friends. And it's really neat. It takes that fear away. And of course, you can imagine in a LinkedIn studio. I don't know if you've seen them, but they're almost like quasi Hollywood studios. They're big rooms, black with big spotlights and a lot of cameras and stuff. And so it's a little intimidating walking there, but they really make you feel at ease. So, and speaking, if you allow me, Matt, very quickly, talking about English. In high school, I had an English teacher. Speaking of writing, and I would write basically crappy book reports. And she says, "Boy, please." She even said to me, I remember this vividly, and I wish I could find her today because I want to show her the 3 books I've written and all the articles I write, just out of spite. But she says, "You will never be able to write, and you shouldn't write." And I'm like, okay, geez, that's really encouraging from a teacher. And then I had another English teacher in university who said to me, "Stop using all these adjectives or these adverbs and stuff like this. Like don't say things like very. Just drop the very and all this kind of stuff." And all LinkedIn is telling me, no, do it the way you talk, right? Just put, say, you get excited and say, "Yeah, I'm very successful," whatever, this type of stuff. So put whatever's negativity somebody told you in the past aside and do what you think is right, period.
Yeah, absolutely. And speak to your audience, right? Speak to your audience the way they speak. Speak to them the way they want to be spoken to. I think is great advice.
By the way, there was one session you did on ATDTK. I think you did it, or you may have done it. People hate their own voice. That's another one.
Yep.
And everybody hates their own voice. I love the fact that you're getting people to acknowledge it. Everybody hates their own voice. And I noticed leading voiceover expert in Canada. He does broadcast media. I mean, he does a lot of voiceover. And I had him coach me a few years back. And I said, "Dave," I said, "I hate my voice." He goes, "Dude," he goes, "I hate my voice." I said, "My God, Dave, you got the best voice on TV." He goes, "The news comes on, I see your voiceover. You do a Subaru commercial, I hear your voiceover. Your voice is awesome." He goes, "I hate my voice."
Yeah.
So one of the leading voiceover experts in Canada hates his own voice, but he says, no, everybody hates their voice. And he said that to me. And so thank you for sharing that, Matt. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a term for it now. I actually found there's research that's been done about this. It's called voice confrontation.
Really?
It's and if you're bilingual, because you're bilingual, right?
Yeah.
You're more likely to hate your voice and have that voice confrontation.
Really?
Like 63%, I'm probably misquoting the stat, but it's like 63% of bilingual speakers have more voice confrontation than like a single language speaker.
Really? Well, okay.
So
I'm getting used to accepting my voice now all this time, since I'm before camera and doing these podcasts and webcasts. So I don't have a choice. So anyway.
Well, Ajay, thank you so much for all the great wisdom and knowledge that you've shared with us. I know it's very timely because I actually had a meeting with the vice president today, and we were talking about some of these things. And I was thinking, man, I gotta figure out how to tie these things together. And you've helped me think through some of the things. So this has been timely for me. If everyone else doesn't like it, well, I apologize. But so much great wisdom, and obviously we're so appreciative for all that you do. So thank you again for coming on the Visual Lounge.
Matt, thank you for having me, and I extend this to not only you. We're friends, and I know we always chat all the time. So you always reach out to me if you want to bend an ear. But my Twitter handle is there, and I encourage people to follow me because I use that as a learning tool, and I broadcast a lot of my articles and a lot of articles I'm interested in reading. I don't get into the fights or spats with it. So join me on that, and if you have any questions, please reach out. I'd be happy. I don't have all the answers, but I'd be happy to have a conversation with you. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll leave you with this final comment, Ajay, that Stephen from Facebook said this was a great interview. So well done. Wow. Yeah. So we'll leave on that note. But everybody, thank you so much. Go check out Ajay's stuff. Like, he's got books, he's got articles, he's easy to find wherever you might be on the internet. As we wrap up today, though, we want to make sure that you're aware of what's new at TechSmith. So let's jump into that right now. All right, there's always something new going on in TechSmith, new content, new things that we're putting out, hopefully to help you make better videos and images and level up your skills. Obviously, we do the Visual Lounge every week, and we'd love to have you tune in live. If you can't, you can always go catch the podcast, available on any of your favorite podcast platforms. You can always go to YouTube. Our videos are up there as well, plus tons of other great information out there. But one of the things I like to point out each week is what's new on the blog. So let's take a look at that real quick. First and foremost, our episode has dropped with Amy Woods. If you don't know Amy, she's fantastic. Runs a company called Content 10X. She talks about repurposing video, and that's what our interview was. Amazing stuff in there, because one of the challenges, I think, if we're talking from a business perspective, video can be expensive. Video can be tough. And if you're making it only for one reason, maybe harder to justify, but she helps us see some of the ways we can reuse it in multiple ways to really get even more value out of that one piece of media. Because if you think about it, you got audio, you got visuals, you're creating, if you transcribe that, you got text, you got all sorts of things you can do with your videos. So that's one thing that I'd like to point out. The next blog post that you should go check out is how to record lectures, 3 methods for online learning success, especially for our educators out there. If you're in higher education, or maybe you're in K-12 or whatever form of education you're in, we know that people are recording lectures. There's lots of reasons why that can be a good idea. There's problems that you might have with recording lectures. So just go, if you're looking for ways to do that, to at least get going, especially considering the health pandemic. If we're stuck in this for a little bit while longer, you might want to get geared up and be able to prepare for that. We also dropped an older episode that we recorded live that never made it to the Visual Lounge, is audio first workflow. We talk very specifically through how you can record and your audio first and then build your video to that, and why you might want to do that, because there's something about recording at the same time that's okay. But if you're looking for a little bit more polish, you're looking for more control, check out an audio first workflow. And whatever your workflow, we always just recommend get a workflow. Find ways that you can make your video creation process scalable and repeatable, because that's going to help you to get better. It's going to help you get faster, and the output's going to usually be a little bit more successful. So with that said, though, thank you everybody again for tuning in. Thank you for listening to podcasts. If you have a moment and you're so inclined, we'd love to have you go out to your favorite podcast platform and just give us a rating and review. We'd love to hear what you have to say. Give us feedback. You can always email us at thevisuallounge@techsmith.com. Thanks everybody we hope you have another great week and you're successful in whatever you're doing in leveling up your skills. Until next time.